Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another predictions video. And in today's video, I'm going to be predicting the Scott versus Robinson fight. And so, if you are new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. Like video if you do indeed like the video, and let's get straight into it. So, going into this fight, Scott is 4-0 with no KOs, and Robinson is 8-3 with 3 KOs. This fight's for the vacant IBF World Middleweight title. Scott's last fight was a win via unanimous decision versus Warner from, and Robinson's last fight was a win via unanimous decision versus Gu Barne. Scott is 40 and Robinson is 36. Robinson's losses have come versus Scott in 2024, Daniels in 2023, and Agbo Bulan in 2023. And to speak a bit more about what I've just been saying, obviously, like I said, this is a rematch. This is, interesting to see why they're rematching it. To be honest, one of the first things I wanted to point out is quite low on the card. It's Brock Jarvis' return as the kind of headline, and he's headlining against not a very big name. They also have Parr versus O'Connell, which is quite a good fight to be honest. A step up in opponent for Parr. Callum, is it? I believe Pero is on this for his debut, and he's a big name, a big prospect for Australian boxing. So like I said, there's a few things going on, and it's a good card. I think No Limits Boxing have been putting together good cards as of recent, and in general, Australian boxing, due to No Limits Boxing, pushing them and putting on these shows, and even being just involved in the shows in general that aren't their shows, they've been doing well and they've been progressing, and they built something in Australia. They are the biggest promotion company. I think the views in Australia are very good. I believe that they all get reasonably good views, and then also the broadcasters as well, having Fox on it as well is a good broadcasting name to have involved with it. So like I say, in general, I think they're doing very well, and this is a good fight to have, even if it is low down. I believe it's a good fight to have on their shows. Of course, it's a world title fight. It is for that IBF world title belt, and that is Clarissa Shields' ex belt. She obviously moved on and went on to fight in the higher weight divisions, and so far is doing well in that aspect. But I think this is a clear downgrade in champion. It's interesting to see that they are, trying to push these vacant belts and putting matchups together for them. But like I say, I think this is a clear downgrade in champion. I'm not too sure if either of them are really warranted this title shot as of yet, but there are a few women's fighters who haven't got many fights and have got a title shot. But I don't know. I think that a rematch is it really warranted a title shot? I'm not too sure, but nonetheless, like I said, it is, and Australian women's boxing is doing very well at the moment, even with a big name such as Ebony Bridges kind of being out and not really fighting, and nobody really is too sure what's happening with her. There's still Australian boxing flying. I mean, you have Shanika Johnson doing excellent things at the moment, and just coming off a win versus Nina Hughes. They're probably going to rematch it because it was a close fight, but it was a win for Shanika nonetheless. So that's a good name to have as well. Sky Nicholson, of course, really dominating in performances, coming off a great win versus Raven Chapman in a performance in which was meant to be a clear step up, was meant to be a tough test for her, but to be honest, it was quite an easy performance in the end, and she did look good. Motu as well, Mia Motu, she's was meant to fight Elise Scotney, I believe, on a Matchroom show, and I think she got injured. But she's still somebody with a good record, and she's still a good name to have as well. And then Shay Keneally is another option. Of course, Lainey Daniels is still about as well, and these are in the heavier weights. And in general, I think adding this as another world champion into the Australian women's boxing ranks, perhaps Australian women's boxing might have the most world champions. I'm not entirely certain for that out of all the countries. I'm not too sure, but perhaps that could be the case, and that's all credit down to the work that they've been doing and how well they've been looking as of recent. And of course, Kay Scott, she's had, like I say, a bit of a progression. Obviously, she's been thrown in with tough tests early. She's been thrown in with winning records since the second fight of it being versus Robinson, and has also been out to Thailand, and that was her last fight against, I believe, a debutant. And it was interesting to see that even happen, to be honest. But Thai boxing and women, well, Australian boxing has got quite a good link from the seams of things, and it seems like quite often fighters are willing to go over to Thailand from Australia and box, or come from Thailand to box. We didn't see too long ago Neom Trong fight Winwood, and that was the kind of first time in which Neom Trong had ever left Thailand, and he went to Australia, went to his home country Winwood, and still managed to win Neom Trong. But nonetheless, like I say, there are fights happening, and it is an interesting time. It is Scott's first 10 rounder, so that's probably going to play a factor as well. I'm sure it's going to be a tough test for her. Obviously, Robinson is that more experienced fighter, but Scott, she's been progressing well so far. So if she can keep going the way she's going, perhaps she'll be able to, be able to not take this as anything different to what she's used to, and it could be an easier fight. Perhaps with them recycling this as a fight, it shows that there's perhaps nothing to really work towards, because like I say, it's a good matchup. I think it's a good fight. I think it's going to be tough for both fighters, and it's probably going to provide entertainment. But at the same time, like I say, just recycling matchups and doing it early on in careers, I just don't necessarily know if it's something in which I like. And the first fight was close, but are we wanting to see it as a world title rematch? Like I say, I'm not too sure, but nonetheless, it's happening. I can't keep complaining about it. Robinson's been fluctuating in weight quite a lot, to be honest. So it's nice to at least see her settling at a weight. She's fought at light heavyweight versus Laney Daniels, of course, and that was, to be honest, I better fight than I thought. It started off a bit rocky, a bit shaky for Robinson, and Laney Daniels was having a lot of success, but then eventually it built into a good fight, and Robinson was coming for it in the later rounds, and she showed that she does improve throughout fights. And like I say, I think it was a good performance in the end for her, and uh, that was another close fight as well. She's also fought, of course, at middleweight. She's fought at super welterweight and at super middleweight as well. So, even though she hasn't had a crazy amount of fights herself, in them 11 fights, she's got that experience and has fought some tough names. To speak about them both individually as fighters, though, Scott, she's got a good jab. I believe both of these ladies have got good jabs. I think they're very different, though. I think Scott's is more of a main weapon and more imposing, more physically strong, actually has a bit more of an impact than Robinson's, whose is a bit more of like a kind of distraction type technique from what the things, well, from what it looks like. It's fast, it can be paired up, tripled up, and like I say, but it's also not really landing with too much power. She uses a rangy strikes. Scott, she's physical. She's always going to respond if she gets caught with a shot, and that is going to work in the early fights between her versus lesser fighters. But I think as she progresses, if she isn't a fighter, if they're a good boxer, they could make Scott look bad, because they can definitely go in for an exchange and then just move out and carry on moving around, and then Scott won't be able to catch them. She's a mid-range type fighter. I believe both of these ladies are mid-range type fighters. I think Robinson can fight better on the inside than that of Scott, and has proved that and is willing to go toe to toe if necessary. But in general, Scott is a bit more of a mid-range type fighter, and I think, like I say, Robinson, I would say, is our most comfortable there. She's got a good chin as well. I think she can take good shots. I think in the past few fights she's taken some decent licks and been able to carry on coming. Same with that of Robinson as well. She's well disciplined. I think she'll often, just reset and go back to a jab, and just whenever there is a null in the fight or anything like that, like I say, she'll reset, go back to doing what she's doing, and then be able to carry on. She's got solid fundamentals, like I say, a lot of it comes off the jab, and them rangy strikes are showcasing her good fundamentals, and in general, I would say perhaps that's better than that of Robinson's. She won't be bullied, like I say, as the physical kind of quite big fighter. She definitely won't be bullied, and I think at middleweight she'll be quite a big presence in which perhaps could impose herself and bully other fighters. She's got a high guard. I think she catches quite a few more shots than perhaps Robinson does, and when she's allowed space, she does a lot of her good work. Like I say, when there is a bit of a null in the fight and she's allowed to reset and have that space, and she finds her range typically well with that good jab of hers. Negatives about her, I would say that she reacts to punches quite a lot. She's quite an uncomfortable type fighter when you are coming forwards from the looks of things, and she'll kind of just stand up straight and take punches, and she'll have her chin in the air, she'll back up in a straight line, she won't really have She'll have her head on the line as well. She's got quite wide, uncontrolled footwork. A lot of the time, it does just kind of keep getting wider, and then it can be looking quite messy, quite uncontrolled if she is put onto the back foot. And she's not really too willing to always take backward steps. She squares up as well a bit at times. I think she smothers and overreaches in close exchanges. I think when you're going back and forth with her, I think she's a lot of the time overreaching with that long reach of hers. I just don't think she's been able to find the range in the shorter shots that well. She doesn't also commit to her shots that well. Like I say, I would like to see her perhaps commit to her jab a bit more and her other big shot. She doesn't really go for big shots too much, and like I say, in general, she's just not really committing to it. She speed isn't really anything too impressive either. I think she is quite slow, to be honest, and flat-footed at times. And when you have speed and a lack of speed and flat-footedness, it's not really the best of combos. I think Robinson is much faster with her hands. She can be quite wild as well, Scott. She doesn't, like I say, want to take too many backward steps. She can be beaten to the punch quite often. Like I say, through the lack of speed, she can be beaten to the punch on regular occasions. She sometimes if she can't get behind her jab, and if somebody is able to slip the jab, or if she isn't able to land it, if her accuracy isn't on point, then I think she can struggle with, like say, if you are getting in close to slipping the jab and things like that. She can headhunt as well. It's nice when you see her go to the body, but in general I think she has relatively limited shot variation and does headhunt quite a bit. And like I say, she doesn't really go for power shots too much. To speak about Robinson as a fighter, I think she's got better movement and better working close than that of Scott, like I mentioned. I think she'll be more comfortable on the back foot and has been on the back foot just circling around in fights often. But in general, like I say, I think she's typically better on the back foot. There is times in quite often where you just see her circling in just one direction over and over again, and it's not the best of things, but at least it's showing that movement in which she does have. She, like I say, is better in close. She's squaring her feet up, and it can look messy at times, but I believe it's still better than that of Scott's. She attempts to go to the body a bit better. Like I say, I think she's got a fast jab. She evades shots quite well. She gets caught less, like I say, similar to evading shots. She finds her range sometimes well. It's a very light jab, like I say, so she can sometimes actually just be pumping it out, not really landing. It's not really an effective jab either. She improves throughout fights. That was shown in previous contests of her, multiple previous contests of her. Against Daniels is an example of this. She really did kind of improve throughout the fights and showed that she can fight into later rounds and, like I said, really come on and really set the tempo and push the pace into the later rounds. She's well conditioned through being able to do that. She was continuously moving into the later rounds, even though it was set at a high tempo the whole fight, and she's resilient as well. Negatives about her, I think she can accept her back foot position, in which I think is definitely going to go into Scott's favour, being on the back foot. She stands tall a lot of the time as well, so she, similar to that of Scott, is quite a big target as well. She's got a low output into the earlier rounds. She's a bit of a slow starter. I think Scott might be able to land some nice shots earlier on and perhaps frustrate Robinson early on, but if Robinson is able to, like I say, build momentum and growing confidence and come into the fight later on, I think she could definitely have success and get some rounds off of that. She doesn't necessarily make her opponents respect her. Like I say, she accepts that back foot position. She has that weak jab, which isn't really doing too much other than, like I say, distracting. So perhaps, well, opponents aren't really going to respect that. She doesn't deal with movers too well. I don't really think that's a problem with Scott, but when Daniels was early on in the fight and she was moving her head round and she was trying to be slick and trying to make things difficult for that of Robinson, Robinson was struggling with the movement of Daniels. Knowing when to exchange, I think sometimes she'll go into exchanges, not really, plant her feet at bad times and get caught with when she goes in for exchanges, or not be close enough to be able to go into a close range type exchange. She, like I said, when she is trying to be aggressive and trying to be the offensive fighter, she doesn't, like I say, time it well enough. She doesn't move into her shots too well. In general, she's not really twisting into her shots. It's not really too powerful. I don't think, I think it's going to take a lot for either of these women to stop each other, but that's just my opinion, and she can smother her work as well. Scott is the favourite for this fight, and I think that Robinson will win via majority decision. I think she's, like I say, going to have the better movement. I think if she fights how she fights versus Daniels and improves throughout the fight, I think she can really pick up some rounds into the later into the later rounds where she's perhaps going to the body better, perhaps just getting in close and being able to make Scott struggle. I think Scott, like I say, if you can get her onto the back foot or just can put any pressure on, she can become flustered, can not know what to do, and I think Robinson will be able to come through there and avenge what happened in the first fight, and that would be a very big win for her, to be honest. And like I say, she's been in a lot of tough contests and not always up the nod, and things haven't always gone her way. You could have argued that there was, like I say, an argument for her to win that first fight between the two of them, but I think she's going to do it, and then I think she's going to be, of course, a world champion off of that. And where she can go after that, I'm not too sure. Perhaps another Scott fight, I don't necessarily know if the division's really that stacked or really got that many names in it, so perhaps a fight like that could make sense. If not, maybe a Green in the super middleweight division could be an option. I wouldn't hate that. She's just recently become WBO champion, but in my opinion, it wasn't really the best of performances. I think she did look quite poor, and she's shown to struggle against quite a lot of fighters now. Well, especially fighters who are going to be in close, and she might be able to, put up a good test versus Scott if Scott's willing to move. But Robinson's willing to move back up to the super middleweight division. Not too sure. Or the winner of Chaos versus Anne Jarley. Chaos is a fighter who has not an unbeaten record, but I believe it's like a 5-1 record, and she's an Australian fighter, and so that could be an option as well. And Jarley is somebody who she's fighting. She's, I believe, like 1-0 an Indian fighter. I'm not too sure if that would happen if she won, but if Chaos won, another Australian matchup there would be easy to make, and I'm sure there are other Australian fighters in which could fight at the middleweight division. With women's boxing in the heavier weights at the moment, a lot of them do fluctuate quite a lot, and you have Clarissa Shields holding light heavy and heavyweight titles off of one fight, which is just confusing in itself. But like I said, they do fluctuate quite a lot. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like it if you did need like video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.